And I really am grateful to be invited to this event and to speak on this topic, one that I think is extremely important at this moment now more than ever. I can't really recall a time in recent history as precarious or as dangerous when it comes to the struggle for Palestine and for inevitable liberation in Palestine. And by extension, I can't recall a time as dangerous when it comes to organizing and an environment as coercive and violent when it comes to organizing events and speaking about Palestine. As you mentioned, my entire professional life has been focused on working in and for Palestine, and I spent a lot of time in the education sector working at the Al-Quds University in occupied Jerusalem. And in that sense, I owe a really big debt of gratitude to the people of Palestine and for Palestine in general for what it taught me, how to be clear when it comes to challenging the violent impact of Zionism and its racist outworkings, and to unashamedly then platform the legitimate demands of anti-colonialism and of resistance. Palestine really awakened in me the need to remove any sense of compromise when it means when we are pursuing justice in the face of present day and historical colonial violence. And it's these principles that I hope to share this afternoon, just a few of them, that guide me then when it comes to educating on Palestine and when it comes to working towards peace and justice in the region, and a peace that isn't weaponized nor softened or blunted by rhetoric or Western imperial interests. I just want to recall one particular moment of personal transformation for me, and Bana will remember this, my colleague on the call. I was teaching a class at Al-Quds University, and I was beginning to sit down and teach a session on transitional justice and truth recovery in spaces of conflict. And this was at a time when our university campus was being violently attacked on a daily basis by the Israeli army, who were coming in and smashing the place up. And as I began to teach, I could hear a commotion taking place outside. I just ignored it, and I began to start my class. And as I was starting, I noticed that one of my students got really quite visibly upset. And I stopped teaching and I just asked her, look, is everything okay? Are you okay? And she just said, Professor, you see that noise you hear outside? That's a gathering of colleagues and friends for my cousin who was shot dead last night in Hebron. What is the point in talking about any of this, of truth recovery, of justice, of peace building? There's no such thing as justice in Palestine. These words are just a load of nonsense. This is nothing. And that intervention was so powerful and impactful on me because it shook in me that liberal persuasion that has thankfully long since disappeared, because it reaffirmed in me the reality that when it comes to talking about Palestine, we have a duty to seriously consider the impact of our language on our framing as educators, as comrades in the struggle, because the framing and the language and the importance of the affirmation of core principles are crucial as to how we then pass these messages on to those who are under our educational care. And so for the next 12 minutes, I think I focus on what I believe some of those core principles are that we must steadfastly hold on to. And these require constant attention, and they require constant recommittal. And I'll just state them. And whilst also outlining areas that I think areas where I think educators on Palestine must also consider as we choose to join the struggle. And we can return to any of these points in the conversation. So core principle number one, as educators, when we talk about peace building and justice in and for Palestine, we have to be honest in our appraisal of the factorial causes that are undermining the attainment of both. This is about framing, far from presenting the reality of the Palestine situation through the language of conflict or intractability or a situation of two states or two sides who can't get along. We have to be very, very clear here that the only way to frame this is through the language of colonization. And this has been well established through decades of scholarship and interventions. People have been talking this from the 60s. But more importantly than that, and this is a trap we see so many educators fall into, we have to present this not as an historical colonial process, but rather as an ongoing colonial situation. And so by extension, and logically, when we ensure our framing is fulsomely and determinately grounded in a present-day understanding of the violent nature of settler colonialism. At this very moment, manifesting itself through genocide, it's necessary then that we use the language of resistance, the language as the only legitimate response to colonialism being anti-colonial struggle. Or to put this another way, as the legally principled and internationally endorsed resistance against ongoing colonization. We have to proudly stand up and say that without fear of equivocation. Because to paraphrase Edward Said, a man who, by the way, taught in the heart of empire and who had bombs sent to his office at Columbia University, any critical scholar, educator, activist, or peace builder who's truly invested in Palestine must nurture space in their classroom to evaluate the right of colonized people to agitate for self-determination, including through armed struggle. This is outlined in UN Resolution 37/43. Now, I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not saying it's without challenge. I have well learned the hard way when it comes to deliberating armed struggle. It's the quickest way to shake up the liberal sensitivity of your classroom. The dynamic, I assure you, will change. But if you're being honest and true to the significance of language, you ought to be reaching no other logical conclusion. There's no space and there's no time to placate liberalism in the face of catastrophic Palestinian erasure. Core principle number one. Core principle number two. When we talk about and teach about justice and interventions for peace, the frameworks for attaining these elusive concepts in and for Palestine are enshrined within an existing language of international law. Our global institutions have made it abundantly clear that there are multiple actions at this moment in time and historically that have been considered breaches of international law, as John Reynolds, an esteemed scholar of international law, showed in the previous seminar. These institutions, including the International Court of Justice, their two separate advisory opinions, and most recently, the opinion delivered by the International Criminal Court pertaining to genocide, have all determined that Israel is in breach of international law, is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, and is being led by political leaders who stand accused of war crimes. So none of this is negotiable. It has been established. But what also needs to be consistently reaffirmed, particularly when it comes to our role as educators when teaching on Palestine, is that third-party states, including Ireland, have a duty and an obligation to uphold international law. This is not negotiable. You can't pick and choose certain aspects of international law for sake of political expediency. And yet that is exactly what is happening in the context of this particular moment. And so if we're being true to our language and our role as educators, it is critical that we remind our students that there is plenty of opprobrium to go around. Third-party states who fail to implement the decisions of these global legal institutions are, by extension, complicit in the facilitated attempted erasure of the Palestinian people in Palestine. Therefore, our anger, whilst certainly there for the genociders and the colonial militias rampaging across Gaza and the West Bank, are also directed inward at our own governments. On to the next one, core principle number three. A particular issue that seems to afflict so many scholars and so many educators, it must be said, is the need to platform all sides of the argument to be seen to be unbiased or in pursuit of some kind of objectivity. This leads to scenarios such as what we saw unfold in RTE recently when the Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, left a radio interview saying that the talking points and the positions that were being platformed by the interviewer were straight out of the Israeli stock phrase handbook, all in RTE's purported aim of objectivity, the most establishment example of attempted respectability politics. But why should we claim that those engaged in a genocide, as I've established through multiple legal organs and other human rights organizations being shown to be complicit in apartheid, crimes against humanity, displacement, why should their position be given any sort of legitimacy alongside the rights of the Palestinian people to resist? This is completely absurd. And so the only logical justice-oriented principle we should adopt when we teach on and for Palestine is one of deplatforming racist ideologues, deplatforming racist policies, and ensuring that these people are not given the airtime. And let me put this to you. You wouldn't feel compelled to give the KKK airtime, nor suggest that they had legitimate grievances when we discussed the civil rights movement in America. Would we actually feel okay with giving the apartheid Afrikaans regime in South Africa a fair hearing alongside the legitimate demands of the anti-apartheid movement led by Mandela, one based on equality, dignity, freedom, and respect for all? So why do we bend over backwards when we give airtime to the viewpoints of an army and society that is predicated on the erasure of Palestinians? Respectable politics, no place for it. So what are our recommitments? I have about 4 minutes left. In the preamble to this session, we're asked, what are our responsibilities as educators when it comes to discussing conflict and violence? How do we ensure dignity and solidarity are central to our practice? I feel I've covered the ensuring dignity part quite a bit. So I just want to put forward a few things I think we must be willing to do when it comes to living up to our responsibilities. And firstly, we must be continuously educating ourselves. Understanding and being truly committed to the cause of liberation in Palestine requires you to be up to date, not only on the foundational work, not only the early critical scholarship, but the swathes of material that is being produced by our colleagues in Palestine being erased off the face of the earth. And I mentioned it at the start, Palestine has taught me more than I can thank it for, but it's a process. You have to be willing and committed to do the educational work on yourself. Otherwise, you're going to have gaps, those gaps which will ultimately impact upon your pedagogy, which will become subsequently blunted, less sharp, and less developed. We have no time for clumsiness. There is no time for mistakes. Next, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to accept that you will be targeted, you will be smeared, you will be accused, you will be defamed. I don't have time here to go into all the various ways I've been publicly attacked, credibility and professionalism called into account, workplace targeted, home life targeted, family harassed in the last 18 months. So you have to be brave in this moment. You have to unashamedly declare your position as being against anti-Palestinian racism, as being for Palestinian self-determination and resistance. And if you can't make that commitment, then you don't have a duty or a right to occupy the space to talk about Palestine. Many people have vulnerabilities that undermine their ability to do this. And if you have those vulnerabilities, we are sympathetic. But if that is the case, vacate the space. And so, look, in closing this together, and I am passionate about this, I'm running emotional and hot about this because there's enough going on to be emotional and hot about. This is not a time to be clumsy. Our role as educators in pursuing legitimate justice-oriented peace building in Palestine as educators is to build on the powerful and eloquent Mohammed El-Kurd in his words when he says, we must raise the ceiling of what is permissible. This is the least we can do because this will require bravery in a world of censorship, in a world of smearing and rising autocracy packaged as respectability politics. But let's not only raise the ceiling, let's raise the roof. Let's own our language. Let's be bold and determined to call Zionism what it is. Let's affirm our commitment to a resistance and struggle for Palestine. Let's always refuse to be drawn into the respectable politics, one that sees no issue in platforming racists and promoting the viewpoints of a state committing genocide. Because if we truly believe, if we truly follow some of these principles, then the education that we provide as committed scholars and activists will be guided by a true commitment to an anti-colonial struggle that defines our time and our generation. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have spoken to you today. I hope it has landed well, and I look forward to some of your questions. Thank you.